I have this device that gives me the questions that the people are asking, but
Yes.
I have my own questions
Let's go with yours.
So, and actually someone else asked a related question. So the first sort of burning issue on my mind is when you set up models like this, there has to be some kind of quantitative objective, right? So Watson isn't just making things up like my 13-year-old would do.
Right.
Watson is told, optimize for clicks, optimize, and you sell stuff that has fairly long and complicated purchase cycles. So if you're trying to do this in real time and the conversions don't happen for a month,
Right.
kind of, what are you optimizing against, and how do you think about that whole purchase cycle and where in it you're measuring?
So this is one of the challenges of IBM. IBM sells things you can buy with a swipe of a credit card. They cost a couple $100. IBM sells things that take 3 months to sell, and they cost $1 billion. So
Right.
we have to have a set of models that actually do that. What we end up doing is we customize Watson to the outcome of the campaign.
Okay.
So if it is a SaaS product and the idea is to get right to conversion in the swipe of a credit card, then it's optimized for the sale. For products that are services or
But it has to wait to see the sale at least like 5 minutes or something, right?
It does, but the models are learning in real time, but the changes that we'll put into them are going to happen a little bit less frequently.
Okay.
So that's the way it would work. But then for longer term, there are always going to be data that is available in the moment, click-throughs.
Right.
Click-throughs are not a great thing to optimize on. If you optimize on click-throughs, some of you will know this, what you end up getting is a system that's really good at having people click through. Mm-hmm. And one of the ways to make people click through—
That's the definition of optimization, Ari?
One of the problems when you optimize on people clicking through is there are ways to make people click through that have nothing to do with the business value.
Right.
In fact, if you're very confusing about the experience, you'll get people to click through.
No, the best click-through rate I ever did was an ad for this conference that said blah, 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 blah. That was the ad, and I got really high click-throughs on it.
There you go.
So next question, still mine. I'm super jealous because you're fitting these advertising response models that have both demographic variables and contextual variables. We talked about this a little bit at lunch. You know, I have an intuition that the context matters a lot, probably more than the demographics. Like even if I knew this person was an IT buyer, that might matter less than what time of day it is and what she's doing and so forth. So can you give us, I mean, not, without showing us model coefficients or anything like that, can you give us just some sense of how much of the prediction is driven by demographic stuff that's sort of static versus context stuff that's in the moment?
The context does. When you have the context, and depending on the depth of context, it will dominate the results. There are even things we don't always understand. I was telling you at lunch that, for instance, time of day and seasonality matter a lot in our model. So seasonality we generally understand, especially in the business that we're in, why that matters so much. But people at 3 a.m., for whatever reason, I don't know who at 3 a.m. is thinking about IBM products, but if you are, it's really an optimized bid, and we don't entirely know why in all the cases.
Okay.
So it's not always intuitive to us or the marketers of what's happening, but you can see that contextual information, where they are, the news matters, the time of day matters, the season they're in matters. For us, weather is not such a factor, but for many of our clients, it's an enormous factor. So the more of that we're able to bring in, the more that the models perform.
Good. I can see that maybe a lot of the audience was sort of, their interest was piqued when you're showing us the Pope and Oprah. In real-time bidding, how would you have sort of text related to the person?
We don't, at this point, pull in the Watson stuff in real time.
Okay.
We will primarily use it today at a segment level, where we actually take the individual and we'll use that as a kernel to define a broader lookalike set of models.
Okay.
And that becomes an input into the model versus something we're pulling in real time. And we'll do that both for analytical reasons, but also there are privacy concerns about using the data in a very, very literal form.
And the other, I think this really did pique people's curiosity. If you had that kind of information, it sort of begs creating very custom messages.
Yeah.
And so the question that's on here that's the highest voted is, how do marketers create custom messages and creative at scale? There could be hundreds or thousands of versions needed.
That is the
The
single.
3 a.m. ad.
Yeah, it's the single biggest barrier that we have, and the reason we don't use more of the very personalized information is we simply can't create enough creative content. The video I didn't show you, I didn't even know it was in this version of the deck, is Watson creates content. So for the audience that I was doing this for a few weeks ago, which was more of an advertising audience, a creative audience, we showed them a trailer that IBM cut for a movie recently. I don't know if I'm trying to remember the name of the movie. It was a horror movie. There you go. It's worth checking out, not because it's a particularly good trailer. It's a very traditional trailer. It's a really interesting trailer because Watson made it. Mm-hmm. So now you start thinking about what the future of creative looks like when you put it together with the power of programmatic. That's what we're working towards. We have some early pilots that we're not ready to share, but that is absolutely happening.
Looking forward to it. Let's see. So we're down to 2 minutes. I'm going back to my questions because we only have 2 minutes.
Chance,
it's
yeah.
my last chance. So Hillary, in her keynote this morning, and you had even mentioned this, that these kinds of tools are not about being kind of universally smart like my 13-year-old is. I'm very proud of her. But being smart in a specific domain. And she actually said that IBM is kind of doing a disservice to the AI and machine learning community by giving AI a name and treating it like a person. You even gave us an analogy to a baby. And that's giving sort of novices or people like my grandmother the wrong idea about what AI is. How do you feel about that?
That's interesting. I wasn't here for that part. So I would distinguish between the way we'll sometimes market Watson and the way we actually talk about it. The reason we don't talk about artificial intelligence is actually very consistent with that same point of view. Or when we talk about artificial intelligence, we will reframe it to be assisted intelligence, because we feel very strongly that the technology just doesn't exist. And frankly, when you think about more generalized artificial intelligence, whether I live to see that is the timeframes that we're thinking about. So we do call it cognitive because we want to emphasize that it's something different than what people think about when they hear artificial intelligence.
It's not how.
It's not how. Now, having said that, our marketing is going to pick up the images and the stories that resonate with our audiences. Putting a character to it, putting a voice to it actually does help in terms of telling a story and telling a narrative, and that's why we go that way. But in terms of the core principle, yeah, that's very much our point of view.
Great. Well, I'm glad you agree with Hillary.
Yes, me too.
I bet she's glad too. All right, well, let's thank Ari. Thanks for coming. It was really great.